But it is to start with our kids and just know and understand how to tell the history of America.
It was the first thing that entered the country, right? Like, I mean, the whole thing was built off of it. Like, you can't, it's like you can't bake a cake and not talk about the flour that you put in it. We've lost a lot, I feel like. That, we've lost, like, the idea of what a fact is.
Well, you guys keep talking. Why you got to talk about, why does everything have to be race? Why do you always bring up race? And because race is the first thing that enters the room when I walk in. For those that are ready, let's begin the conversation. But when we look at, let's say, the Jewish community and Jewish and Hasidic community and the horrific past that they've endured, they have a history. They know their history. They embrace their history. Even the individuals, some of the individuals who were part of or ancestors of, encourage learning that history. So if you went to Germany right now, they would tell you and encourage you to go to the Holocaust Museum. They want you to know that history. Knowing the history is what keeps them united, which keeps people together. They take no nonsense when it comes to disrespecting that religion and being anti-Semitic. Because for God forsake, you said something anti-Semitic. Even it leaned toward the anti-Semitic world. The power structure would rain down on you and you would be canceled. And without hesitation. And this is the first moment in time in history where, at least in this short period, where if you said something that was deemed racist, the power structure rained down on you. And I was like, oh, wait a minute, it's exactly the same. We want that same level of intensity. But the problem is there's a gap for us. We are not aware of our history, so we cannot trace our genealogy back but so far. In addition to that, the bulk of the world doesn't know the true history and struggle of people who were brought here against their will. And to me, just you having a small awakening and you're now saying, you know what, I want to learn more. I don't know. I didn't know much about this particular situation and scenario. So you know what? I want to learn more. I want to understand the history so that I can now, that is where I think we need to be as a country. That, you know, we need to have the 1619 Project taught in school. We need to have individuals learn, and not to shame, not to say your ancestors were, even if you have family members who sit across the table from you right now and use words that you are stunned by, that you think you may have thought they thought them, but if they're saying them out loud now, you're like, what the hell? So to me, you know, to have you in Portland in the streets screaming and yelling and wanting to fight for equality is heartwarming to us.
I would Rebecca, I was thinking when you're saying that, I'm not going to say the name of the company, but I know that you have never really been one that was unafraid to be in a meeting or in a situation from which the topic of diversity was to be had, and you not kind of speak up and say, well, let's look at the obvious thing that's happening here. You want to talk any to kind of your...
Totally. I think I've heard some wild things from old men in HR, honestly, old white men, and not just old white men, but particularly that. I was in a performance review meeting where it's like all the managers in the org are talking about everyone who's like not a manager essentially, and which is like an odd procedure in general, but I don't know the right way to do that part. But and it starts with like statistics on how your organization is doing versus the entire company, and on like retention and kind of all your normal HR metrics. And I'd ask, like, do we have this split by any diversity metrics? Because if like women are leaving in 3 months and everyone else is staying, or and I just remember looking around the room like, well, there's not a single black woman in this room, and there's no black men either, but I know there's at least 2 in the org, but not in this room. And I think there was probably 40 people in the room, and maybe I was one of 5 women managers. So it was obviously just like not a very diverse room in general. But man, that guy lost his marbles. Like, he was so personally offended that I brought up the fact that like this room wasn't diverse enough. And he had come from Walmart, and before that he worked for the FBI, I think, in like the Bush administration. And I just remember him being really tall. He was like 6'4", just like yelling at me down this conference table of 40 people about how like I clearly don't understand confidentiality and diversity data, and like why this is a sensitive topic. And like he just lost it. And nothing, and I didn't really know what to do in the moment. I was just kind of froze, and some other people spoke up, which was great, and it ended up being an okay day, but nothing came of that. I'm like, this guy who's your VP or director of HR is telling us that it's a pipeline, but just spewing all of the BS that we know is a myth about how it's a pipeline problem and how like black people just aren't interested in these jobs and like yada yada yada. And right, I'm like, you're the director of HR, like, and everyone has to go through you to get a job. Like, what? I was
exactly
astonished, and like, I like could not even handle it. And then just nothing happened. Like the next day, my director, who's like that guy's same level, came and apologized. Was just like so embarrassed this happened in his meeting. I was like, okay, what are we gonna do about it? And I basically leveraged that experience into what is now my relationship with Keisha. Like, I was like, cool, if you guys are going to force me to go recruit people because I'm the only woman around, then I'm only talking to black kids. Like, I'm not going to go to these white universities and bring you more of the same crap. So, and to be fair, I did go to a PWI near Central and had a very like weird experience with the students there, just in terms of like, a lot of it was like, I already have an offer from Facebook. Like, what can you do for me? Versus like the students I met at Central, like, I'm honored to serve as my class treasurer, and it's so great to meet you. And like, how are you? And there's just a huge difference in who I felt like could contribute like positively to an organization. And I feel like the stuff at work is terrible. And I've even been in positions where I'm hiring and I've said, you're giving me too much information. I don't want anybody's names. I don't want anybody's faces. I don't even want their LinkedIn profiles. Like, just give me these empty resumes and then I'll tell you who I want to talk to. But like, as a woman in tech where there's not a lot of women around, it biases you. If I know I've got women in my pipeline, it totally biases me. So I've been in situations where I'm like, you're giving me too much info. Like, I can't do that. Or situations where you've been on an interview loop and someone will interview them in the morning and then tell you what they think before you interview them in the afternoon. I'm like, no, like, do not talk to me about that. And then you see it like systemically, where every time they do hire someone who's not a white guy, they're coming in a lower pay grade than the role was initially listed for, or they're coming in at a less like fancy title or whatever. So that's when I was just kind of like, this isn't good. And it's like, and they have these systems inside, like these mini institutionalized racist systems inside these companies that are just as bad as what we've got in the government. And they don't think they're any different because like, oh, tech is this open place, and if you just work hard enough, you can get in. But it's not like that at all. Like, if you have to get past a panel of like 6 white dudes, good luck. And I've had friends do the same thing with their resume, and it works like many times. Yeah, I've got quite a few friends. I can't even remember what Jay's full name is, but she only goes by like Jay now because like she could not get interviewed. Yeah. Right. So it's conversations like that. And I know it's embedded in all of us, like especially white kids, especially growing up in the community that I grew up in. And to be honest, the first time I understood unconscious bias, it was when someone cut me off and I gendered them, like before I knew who they were. I was like, that woman? And then I drove by and it was a guy. I was like, oh, that's what that is. Got it. Yeah. Okay. Now I get it. So I tell that's like, whenever I'm talking to a group of like coworkers about unconscious bias, they're all like, oh no, I don't have that. And I was like, when's the last time you gendered someone who cut you off on the highway? Every single time, and like, then once you like peel back that little layer, you start in your daily life recognizing when you do it to other people, whether they're women or black people or whoever. And then you start to realize how much of it you're just replaying because you've heard someone else say it, or you've heard it, or you've seen it somewhere. And that you didn't even I didn't mean to learn that. but I did, and now I have to unlearn it. And I think like I don't feel particularly like humble in my day-to-day life, but I do feel like the people who can't realize that they have things to unlearn, like have some humility that they need to learn. Like it's not that hard. Like you just have to admit that like you learn some things that are wrong and you got to fix it.
I don't care if you don't like me because you have these pent up beliefs. I could care less if you don't like me. Just treat me equally. Mm-hmm. Okay. You could go home and call me the N-word all day long. I don't care. But don't come out and treat me like the N-word. That's all I'm saying. And that's where I believe most people want to be. All of us have biases. Mm-hmm. All of us have prejudices. All of us believe that we're on a certain place on the pecking order. Because there are times in our life that we genuinely have felt relief when we didn't do something, when it wasn't someone who looked like us. And it's sad that we have to think of these little things and say, wow, because we got enough weight on our shoulder. We don't need to do this. We don't need to be this serial killer. We don't need another thing for someone to come out and say, see, here's why Black people are bad. And that is what we are getting tired of. You've been taught through imagery, through repetition, through TV shows, through music that we're even perpetuating ourselves. Mm-hmm. We are constantly saying that we are bad and to fear us. If you listen to the message that is currently coming out of the administration, they are blatantly saying Black people are coming into your neighborhoods and taking them. They're going to take poor people. Poor people is not the equivalent. The equivalent answer or imagery is not Black
people. Right.
Getting $600 extra as a supplement to your unemployment insurance does not equal Black people. I believe more than the Black community is unemployed right now. Mm-hmm. But if you listen to the messaging, it is us who are being attacked yet again. And it is okay because he is speaking to a specific swath of the population. To think that we don't feel the same way, that we don't care for our children, that we don't fear when our children walk out the door that something is going to happen to them equally to everyone else, that we don't want our kids to be part of a good school system, that we're not equally vested. The reference you made to Portland, the idea that because it is predominantly white and has sprinkles of people of color, it did not have the struggle to even worry about how we distribute money through our city. I didn't know that.
I didn't either.
I learned something on this call, and that's fascinating to me. Yeah. Now I need to research that some more because I'm now intrigued by that. Because to me, that's offensive to me. But that is the world in which Portland lived in.
And that's it. And I think too, it just made me to think about this idea of precision and how things are done with precision. Surgical. And to your point, it is to say with a surgical maneuver, I'm going to ensure that there is a subset of this population that are never going to be given the resources to make it out of their situation. And so that's truly amazing.
I think Portland thinks that they're okay, like that this is fine because there was no one, like it happened on accident, like because there was no opposition, because there was no Black visible community and no one said, hey, we should give less funding there. They think like, oh, well, had there been, we would have kept it the same. Would you? All 49 other states where they did have a visible Black community, they said like, we're not going to fund them. We'll fund everybody else. So like, I don't really believe that like you probably still would have done the right thing. I think the opportunity to do the wrong thing just didn't present itself in the same way. And that's what they went with. And I think like to your point too about like language and stuff, like the other thing I remember having kind of an awakening about was like respectability politics and just how like, even if I know you don't, but if you did call Keisha your baby mama, that doesn't necessarily mean you're not qualified for whatever job I'm hiring you for. And like, yeah. And like, I know that's not what you're saying either, but I think that even just someone who grew up in a family that was like, well, that's not ladylike. And then, years later, respectability politics, I'm like, okay, yeah, I get that. I get that why that's painful. And I think, I know it's not the same thing, but like the mental gymnastics, there was when I first started my job out of college, there was 3 months where I was like in the closet, and I was dating someone, and this lovely woman I shared an office with misgendered her as a man, like from the very beginning. And I just kind of got scared. And when I left North Carolina and I had just come out, my parents said, like, don't come out, like no one will hire you, like yada yada. So I was already kind of nervous. And then she just called the person I was dating a guy, and I just kind of went with it. So for like 3 months, the mental gymnastics of having to regender the person I was spending my like evenings with to stay in the closet at work was exhausting. And I don't think people realize that Black people do that all the time, whether it's hoping Obama doesn't have a scandal, or not sure if you can wear a hoodie and a mask in the grocery store without having an issue, or like whatever. Like, I don't think people understand like the mental toll that it takes on you. And I think that like, and again, all this stuff's connected. That's why if you look at healthcare in the Black community, and like why like heart disease is such a bigger issue, because like the stress that you're putting on folks for no good reason is it's killing them. Like, and that's the other thing that that professor would talk about too, is like the police are just like the most in your face method of killing Black people in this country, but they are by far not the largest source of.
And that is exactly why I don't necessarily believe the BLM movement is predominantly about going after law enforcement. It's about tearing down the system that is systemic, that is denying us equal opportunity. Yeah. And to me, all we ask for is I don't want to do the whole I have a friend, because we both have people we know that are in law enforcement. I believe that the majority of people in law enforcement are out there trying to do the right thing. But there is a culture within law enforcement that trains them just the way that every corporation has. They train them to view, whether it's subconsciously or unconsciously, however you want to look at it, to think that people of color should be handled and treated differently, that you don't hold them to the same level of expectation that you would do a white man or woman. You know, even with the, you know, you come in with individuals who are in the same sex relationships that, you know, believe it or not, and again, you're living that world, and I can't speak to it because I'm not. But the fact that even your struggle feels like it's more acceptable if you came into the corporate world as a gay woman, than I would come in to Nike or wherever as a Black man saying, hey, I want to come in this world. And that they would still look at you as less threatening.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I can hide it. You can't, right? Like, and that's the same thing with the cops. Like, blue people don't exist. Like, those people wake up every day and they make a decision to put their badge on. I don't wake up every day and make a decision to be gay, but I may make a decision to show it that day or not, you know? Like,
right.
Yeah. And I have privilege in that. Like, I'm a pretty straight presenting woman, and like, I can get away with that. Not everyone is, but totally. I have, like, absolutely. I think that's a huge difference. Like, and that's also obviously an issue, but I think, yeah, the fact that like I can hide it if I want to or need to, like, I know people talk about like code switching, like it's much harder to like physically present differently.
But we have to do it as well. And we'll talk, I mean, I'll briefly talk about this. We have that as well. I mean, within our own culture. And to me, the one thing that I want to be part of this conversation too is that it's self-accountability. There are things that we as Black people need to do differently. That to assume that that someone can sit on their tails and expect the world now to come hand them their 40 acres and a mule and their fortune and automatically promote them into the world is not realistic. That you still have to go out there and be equal to, but you have to afford us the opportunity to try, to learn, to get the education, to get the exposure. And to me, when we struggle with, even within our own community, you know, the lighter our skin, because we've been conditioned to think that the lighter your skin, the more appealing and acceptable you are. And then the darker our community gets, the less acceptable, and their struggles even real within our community. And that's a conversation that we have frequently and openly with ourselves, that we're color struck. And when we say that, we're not talking about white or Black. We're talking about within our own world, you know, Black on Black, you know, discomfort, and it is real. So there's no easy fix. There's no one conversation that's going to change it. There's no one person.
It's hard. Like this time of year, I guess like August of 2016, I still felt really hopeful and like felt like I never felt like we had it in the bag, but I definitely didn't like, you know, was hopeful. And then now I'm just like trying to pretend like he's going to win and I have to just deal with that. And then if it doesn't turn out that way, I'm afraid.
I'm not going to accept that we're going to win until.
I was just, I think ultimately the hard part about all of this is it's like we're asking for a generational amount of change, and we want it as soon as possible, obviously, because it's well past due. But to me, and I think Keisha and I talked about this a couple weeks ago, is like we need to burn all the textbooks and start over. Like you really have to start with kindergartners and teaching them like the true, like you were saying, I think what you said about the history thing is exactly spot on. And like, and it's, they position it, you can't have it both ways. Like you can't respect and care and think about the Holocaust and like research it and draw those strong lines and say that the things that happened with Black people were 400 years ago, it was so long ago, why you care? Well, no, clearly, like you gotta
that's the thing.
Stop talking about it, right? And I was telling her that I was had mixed feelings because Morgan Freeman has got a viral video going out where he's reading the last words of John Lewis. And I kind of told her I have these mixed feelings about Morgan Freeman, who had a personal admiration for Morgan Freeman because I met him as a teen. He actually came and did a movie with us and portrayed our principal. Just to see him be part of a video where he's sort of just dismissing racism.
How are we going to get rid of racism until...
Stop talking about it.
Like, don't talk about it. The reason we have racism is out there because you keep talking about it. Just stop talking about it.
It's like Trump in the
and I'm like, and I'm sitting there going, but there's a number of celebrities who were simply saying this is before the world shifted. This is before it shifted on its axis. But there's video of him saying, don't talk about it.
But again, Morgan Freeman and folks like that have been so far removed from the actual struggle of a Black person being you're
rich
and
you're the voice of John Lewis,
right.
And his last words seems contradictory to me. And I would love to have a conversation with Mr. Freeman to say, I need you to better explain this to me. How you can say in one breath, don't talk about racism. Don't talk about it. Don't do this. But then be willing to talk about racism and share the struggle and be the voice of someone as notable as John Lewis. And that, to me, I look at that and say, again, these are struggles that we have within our own community. We have people who are saying things that are baffling us, and we hear so often from the other side or other cultures saying, well, you guys keep talking. Why you got to talk about? Why does everything have to be race? Why do you always bring up race? And because race is the first thing that enters the room when I walk in.
Right.
It was the first thing that entered the country, right? Like, I mean, the whole thing was built off of it. Like, you can't, it's like you can't bake a cake and not talk about the flour that you put in it. Like, it's there, it exists, it's core in our foundation.
But it is to start with our kids and just know and understand how to tell the history of America, be unapologetic about it, the bad parts, the good parts, where we, what we've lost, what we've gained. I mean, there's so much in the story. So I don't want anyone to think that, particularly as Black people, we're sitting here saying, well, America is, our whole life, history has just been full of turmoil and chaos. No, we received, a lot of advantages throughout the course of our lives because of the struggles of our ancestors and of our, parents and grandparents. So I just think we have to be real and honest with that whole, trajectory that we experience as the American story, whether it's happy, whether it's sad. Guess what? I think it's all beautiful.
Bye.